FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Trilogy Metals is a world-class developer in Alaska's Ambler mining district. The company already possesses 8 billion pounds of copper, 3 billion pounds of zinc, over 1 million gold equivalent ounces, and now over 77 million pounds of cobalt. Trilogy's Arctic project boasts an after-tax net present value of $1.4 billion with a 33% IRR. Trilogy is led by an experienced management team with proven success in discovering and developing projects in Alaska. The company is well capitalized, has no debt, and possesses strong institutional support. Trilogy trades on the New York and Toronto exchanges under the ticker symbol TMQ. To learn more, go to trilogymetals.com. That's trilogymetals.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. Today is 5/14/19. Well, a trade war has taken place. Well, half the Democratic Party and former Obama administration top people get indicted. What's going to happen here? Where is this whole thing heading? Well, Matt and I, you've heard him here before. Matt, you are chairman of the Republican Liberty Caucus. It's great to have you back. So first,
yes,
trade war with China. Where's this heading?
Well, I'm hoping, I've heard the theory proposed that Trump's end game is zero tariffs on both sides. So I'm hoping that's the long-term end game. I'm a little nervous, honestly, as this ratchets up. I mean, the last report I saw in the first year of the tariffs, it looked like the cost was roughly $19 billion to U.S. consumers, according to one of the studies I showed from FEE, the Foundation for Economic Education. So a little nervous, obviously, as they ratchet these things up to cover more goods. That's going to take, a toll on the U.S. economy. But the flip side, relatively speaking, obviously we're in better shape than China. So I think as these things heat up, they're going to suffer more than we are, which will hopefully bring them back to the table, and we'll end up with all better off than where we were when we started.
You think so, eh? Really? Well, hey, who has more to lose in this thing? Obviously, it's not good for Amazon because all their stuff is made in China, right?
Well, or Walmart, for that matter.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Right. That's that's what I say, though. The whole concept of tariffs. I know that's a constitutionally allowed form of taxation, but that comes back on us. That's when the prices go up and the U.S. consumer pays that. And the impact of these tariffs is so much greater that, the president has done a lot of good behind the scenes with the deregulation and then, of course, the tax cuts. And so, on the one side, he's doing all of these wonderful things that are stimulating the economy, the changes, remember, in the rules about depreciation, all of these things that are really, on the one hand, revving up the economy. But these tariffs, I mean, these are big numbers, and they're going to affect all U.S. consumers. If you, like I said, shop at Walmart, you shop at Amazon, there's going to be a cost to those. So, like I say, I'm hoping, I've heard people theorize that the end game of all this is, to end up with truly, free trade, where we've got, no tariffs or very low tariffs on both sides. And I'm hoping that is the end game. But until we get there, this is a very risky proposition.
Yeah, well, don't you think, though, it had to be done?
I personally do not, because I don't believe, I think the whole notion of a trade balance is flawed. I mean, the fact is, we do have something to show for the money that we send overseas, and that's, lower priced goods. I think it's unfortunate that the U.S. government has put the United States, the people that do want to manufacture in the United States are basically unable to compete because of the regulatory environment and the unions and all of that. That's a shame. But to me, the answer is not to put up arbitrary, political trade barriers. The answer is to get rid of the regulation, get the government out of the manufacturing business and let them compete.
Yeah, well, that sounds all well and good in practice, and you definitely have a valid point. But we've been at war, economic war with China for 20 years now. And frankly, we haven't been doing too well in it. And the failure to recognize that we are at war with a country, whether it's right or wrong, is dangerous in its own right, don't you think?
I do. Okay, so now, yes, and now this is where I'm going to pivot, and it's going to sound maybe like I'm contradicting myself, but I promise you I'm not. So if you step back, like to me, there's a fundamental problem with the fact that we trade with China in the first place, right? So if we say you are a communist country, kind of almost communist dictatorship, you don't recognize human rights, why on earth are we trading with them in the first place? Because you're essentially rewarding, I've heard people talk about the sweatshops and they have, the equivalent of slave labor. Why would we reward that behavior, right? By buying all of this stuff that's created in these sweatshops and by these people that are essentially slave labor. So there is an argument to be made from a national security standpoint that you shouldn't trade with them at all. And that's where it kind of like, to me, the lines get very muddy and people take, you go from this national security perspective over into the trade. And the best example I can give you in terms of the how the different policies would work out is look at what happened to Cuba after we, basically zero trade policy with Cuba, right? Nothing comes in, nothing goes out. They're frozen in the 1950s. Like they're literally frozen in time in 1950, 53, something like that. And, so the question is, 59, why didn't we pursue that policy with China?
Yeah, well, look, I don't think that's a valid argument, because if we're starting to judge everybody who we trade with, we'll only be trading with 2 or 3 countries in the world. I mean, you can't trade with Vietnam. They're communist. There are reasons not to be trading with Cuba because they absconded, they expropriated tens of billions of dollars in U.S. property with no compensation. They defaulted on their debt, screwing over. But you agree there's
banks. A line there somewhere, though. There is a line. There is a point at which you say we're not good. That's all I'm saying. That's where is that line, and how does it?
All right, and the line is this: where they directly challenge and interfere with American interests, damage them in the past, or have basically done things to the country that are unacceptable. Then you draw the line. And I'm not saying that we should or shouldn't trade with China. I think we probably should, and it's probably unavoidable. And I do tip my hat in favor of free trade wherever it's possible and can actually be done. But level playing field, and let's get rid of all of the barriers on everybody's side so that we don't argue over this stuff. And look, it's ridiculous to say that the EU subsidizes Airbus, which is the first or second largest manufacturer of, probably the second largest manufacturer of aircraft, commercial aircraft in the world, when we do the same thing to Boeing, just do it through military overpayments and things like that. Boeing is the leading recipient of corporate welfare in this country and probably the world. So that's totally hypocritical. So I think it's important not to be hypocritical, but I think it's important to lay out rules so that we don't look hypocritical and stupid, which we often do in the world. Hey, let's move on from that, because I think it's going to resolve itself one way or the other. I heard we export 100 billion a year to them. They export 500 or 600 billion to us. It's a little lopsided relationship, and the future stability of the dollar, regardless, probably is in doubt, but that will definitely speed it up. Let's go on to what's happening. DOJ, post-Mueller democalypse or democratic apocalypse seems to be what we're going through now. And where is this all going to wind up, Matt?
Well, it certainly looks like it's headed in the right direction, right, in terms of now reinvestigating the origins of the dossier and going back into the Hillary Clinton email. So it appears on its face that Barr is serious about cleaning house, and that's very exciting. I think if they actually go and investigate, certainly if they investigate Hillary, and the others with the same standard, right? That let me rephrase that: the same vigor, the same relish that they've investigated Trump. That something will come of those investigations, and we might actually see some accountability for once.
That would be a shocker, wouldn't it? Hey, what I find
it really would. That would be significant.
And I got to tell you, what I find so freaking amusing is Rod Rosenstein, and they can't say enough good things about this guy. So they must have flipped him when he was there. When AG Barr gave his conclusions about the Mueller investigation, he looked like Chris Christie looked when he was behind Trump that time, and just totally didn't want to be there, like he was suffering from the Stockholm syndrome or something. But he had to be there because to give that report any credibility, the guy who initiated it needed to be there. But he totally would have wanted to be any other place in the world. And then they had Rosenstein's going away party at DOJ. I don't know if you caught that or not, but he was jovial. Barr gave a brief chronology of Rod Rosenstein's career, that he started out in the U.S. Attorney's Office under Robert Mueller in Massachusetts, and how far they go back together. But, everyone had a smile, and the guy left holding his head high. Obviously, he contributed something to this whole thing that was very necessary and a vital role in unraveling it all. I mean, what's your take on Rosenstein?
I agree as well that, it goes back to what you said earlier. I've seen several people that I would not have thought would speak positively of him have, I don't want to say lavishing praise, but they've definitely been more positive.
Oh, they've been lavishing praise.
And
they were.
And so no, and a lot of these guys, I mean, the whole concept of, legacy and how you're going to be talked about in the history books is a big deal for some of these guys. And so maybe that's what they were able to play on his, hey, if you want to go down on the right side of the history books, work with us and we'll play nice.
Well, it looks like he got a get out of jail free card. He might be the only one who winds up getting one here. It looks like he's okay. He's left with his head held high, unlike the rest of them in the FBI that have been fired. And then we just find out.
Imagine you talk about a rush to throw the other guy overboard, right? When the music stops and there aren't enough chairs left, it's every man for himself.
Hey, it's like rats running from a tenement fire. That's what these guys are like. And they can't get far enough away. And a guy like Comey, every time he opens his mouth, I think he's adding 5 years to his sentence, right?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I agree. It is amazing how these guys, like say book tour and speaking engagements and all this, like, hey, just keep digging the hole.
Yeah. So. Yeah, which leads me to believe that Mueller gave him immunity and they're just not admitting it. It's like nobody talks the way they're talking without having gotten immunity. You just don't do it.
That would be interesting to see how it shakes out. Or like say I don't know, it just seems these people are so rarely held accountable. Maybe they
arrogance, the arrogance of power. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. Maybe he really thinks he won't.
I don't know. I just can't believe that they could be this irresponsible towards their own self-incrimination. Him and McCabe and that guy Jim Baker. Not the preacher, the FBI former general counsel. And then, Christopher Wray just seems to be totally good for nothing. The guy is completely useless. He hires this guy Buono to be his general counsel, who was part and parcel in the whole coup. And then he says, well, I wouldn't call what Trump went through spying. Well, what would you call it then if it's not spying? I mean, just a peek under the covers?
We definitely know it's not wiretapping, right? Look at all the hell Trump called for calling it wiretapping.
Yeah, and that was deliberate, in his own inimitable style. That was clear that Trump deliberately misstated it. But that's just the way he is, because the trolls came out, right? He trolled them, and they all took the bait. And how could you say this? And spying, hey, can any thinking person not believe that that he was spied upon?
Right. No, that now you're back to right. How much of this gets to the average American voter, right? I mean, there definitely seems to be a trickle down effect, or I don't know what the proper word is, but it takes a significant amount of time for this type of information, especially with you got the mainstream media covering things up and pushing their own narrative, for it to kind of trickle down. And that's what is amazing to me, is the kind of that delayed reaction or response. So hopefully by the time we get to the 2020 cycle, all of this will be out there. It'll be obvious to everybody.
Yeah, and maybe
what has happened.
And obviously a lot of this could have been exposed already, let's face it. We know that. But it's in Trump's interest to put off the day of reckoning to as close to the 2020 election as possible. Do you think these crazed people are going to believe it when if they start seeing people get marched out of the, marched away in cuffs for treason or spying on the president?
Well, that'll be hard I would think that would be hard for the MSM to ignore, right, at that point, because you remember how, gleefully they were covering Roger Stone, right, they had, the SWAT team and everybody else going and dragging Roger Stone out of his house at 6 o'clock in the morning, whatever it was. So it would be hard for the MSM to ignore, some of these key officials being perp walked out of the out of a federal building,
which we don't wish on anyone, because that's just the suffering that goes on there. The horror in that type of thing in your life, in your family, is just a horrible thing, and you can't wish that upon anyone. But what you can hope for is accountability and the truth coming out. And hey, they participated in this. If they did, then they got to be held accountable, right?
Absolutely. And I have to say selfishly, I personally have filed a criminal complaint against the corrupt elected official that did get convicted and go to jail. And I really did wish it on him because he deserved it. So I I understand what you're saying completely.
That's
like you said, if you actually did the crime and you did it with malice aforethought, and, there are certain things where, I have to say we threw a party when he was convicted. So
yeah, well, there are really evil people too. I think some of these people just got caught up in something but there are other ones. I can definitely
see that in that, right, in that culture, right, in that type of bureaucratic culture. I could definitely see you being on, if you're on the periphery and you are perhaps asked to do something where you're kind of like,
you're told to do it.
Do I go with the flow? I mean, that part I do sympathize with, where, do you, and especially these days, whistleblowers are not protected. If you're put in that situation, that is a difficult calculation to make. Do you basically risk the rest of your career, your retirement, to take a stand against something you think is wrong when there's absolutely no guarantee that you're going to get anything,
and your family will be destroyed? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's a tough decision. And a lot of times you're told to do things. And I mean, I had a friend who worked for a company that wound up under investigation. He was high-ranking official in that company, and they were cooking the books. Without getting into it, they created the 35-day month so they could boost their sales. He went along with it, but he was the least authoritative or powerful person in that conspiracy. But he got taken down. Right. He wound up spending like 90 days in jail and, paid a 7-figure fine. And, it just wasn't him. So anyways.
No, I do. No, that's like you say, that's a little bit different scenario than when, like you say, but to the extent, in the case I was referencing, it was a couple of key people, and the couple of key people are the only ones that got arrested. So
yeah, and that's fine. And there are evil people running things all over the country, and they deserve to reap what they've sowed. But there are these peripheral people who are just kind of dummies. I mean, you would call them if it were a video game, you'd call them an NPC. A non-playable character. They've just been programmed.
Exactly right. They're just automatons going through the motions, right?
Yeah, it's unfortunate and it's sad. And but when political power starts getting abused, these are the types of things that happen. So you think, what about Comey going? What about the Clinton people? You think the House of Cards is going to come crashing down?
I think so. The only question that I've not researched is is there a statute of limitations, for instance, on the email stuff?
Not on treason. Not on treason.
Not for treason. Yeah, good point. Okay, touche. Yeah. So that's, depending on, that was the only thing I was kind of questioning was.
Valid point.
What impact would it have?
There is a 5-year federal general statute of limitations. When it runs from and when it's over. So we could well be hitting up against it for certain charges. But the thing is that if we just focus on the plot to take down the president alone, that covers enough people. You start getting into all these other federal felonies and, forget it. Who knows? But treason itself, hey, well, Matt, it's always great to hear from you. You doing any events in the near future? Going to any events that we should keep our eyes open?
Funny you should ask. I'm flying to California on Thursday for our 2019 convention. So we're in Redondo Beach at the Crowne Plaza Marina. And we've got state leaders from all over the country will be at that convention. So we're going to have a really nice time. Looking forward to it.
All right. And hey, it's always great to talk to you, have you on the show. Hey, just tell us your website, where we find you at.
Sure. It's rlc.org. And you can follow us on Twitter at rlibertycaucus.
rlc.org. Link will be in the show notes to the interview. Make sure you send us an email if anything we talked about resonated with you and you want to talk about it. We'd love to hear from you. The email address is kl@kerrylutz.com, Twitter feed @KerryLutz, Facebook page, Financial Survival Network. If you're listening to this on a podcast or on YouTube, all we ask is that you subscribe, like, and share. And actually, we can program that in too, so you could become an NPC with the Financial Survival Network. So subscribe, like, share. What that does, why it's important, it really helps get the word out about the show, gets information out there that just isn't that well known, especially if you are still watching the lamestream media, which if you are, you should immediately stop and start reading your news from all sources, because, production values aside, news, you need to test it, you need to analyze it, you need to deconstruct it. And that's what we try to do here. Construct the stories. Hey, Matt, it's always great having you on. We will talk to you again real soon. Enjoy that conference and be well, my friend.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it, Kerry. We'll talk to you soon.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.